The man who sat down across from her without invitation did not look dangerous. That was the first thing Nkechi Oduya registered. Not the two men who had been standing 4 feet behind him since she walked into the restaurant. Not the way the entire room had gone quiet with the specific silence of people who have recognized something and decided collectively to become furniture until it passed. Just him. The way he settled into the chair across from her, like it had been waiting for him. Like the table was his and she was the unexpected variable, and he had not yet decided what to do about her. He looked at her food, then at her face. "You're in my seat," he said. In Korean, flat. Nkechi looked at the seat, looked at him, looked at her dagalbi, one which was extraordinary, the kind of food that makes you stop mid-bite and briefly reconsider every dining decision you have ever made, and still warm. "Your name is on the reservation?" she asked. "This table is always reserved." "So is this one," she said. "For Park Soo-jin, that's me." He looked at her. Dark suit, no tie. The kind of face that gave nothing easily and had clearly been giving nothing for a very long time. Sharp jaw, dark eyes that moved over her face like they were filing information away in a place she would never be able to access. He was not a large man. He didn't need to be. There was something about the way he occupied space that made the space arrange itself around him, rather than the other way around. "Park Soo-jin," he said, and with the careful patience of a man conducting a conversation in which the other person had not yet realized they were operating on borrowed time, "is the Deputy Director of the Seoul Cultural Affairs Office. She is 53 years old. She has held that position for 22 years. A pause. "I know her personally." Nkechi chewed. "That is very interesting," she said. "Is it?" "It is, because it tells me she has a very strong professional reputation, and I can see why this restaurant takes her reservations seriously." The silence that followed had weight to it. Real weight. The kind that fills a room, not because nothing is being said, but because the person across from you is deciding something and has not yet finished deciding it. Then one of the men behind him said his name. Seong-jae, quiet, and a single word carrying what sounded like a warning wrapped in deference. The man called Seong-jae did not turn around. He kept his eyes on Nkechi with the unhurried thoroughness of someone examining an unexpected thing from a position of complete security. Then something moved across his face. Brief. Gone before she could name it. "Who are you?" he said. "Someone who genuinely needed the dagalbi," Nkechi said honestly. "I read about it. The reservation line said there were no tables. I made a series of decisions I am currently at peace with." He looked at her for a moment that lasted longer than it should have from any practical standpoint. Then he said to the host, who had materialized from somewhere close, "Wrap her food." He stood, the full height of him, and he looked down at her one final time with that quality she still could not name. Not threat, not amusement, something more careful than either. "You have interesting instincts," he said. "I have a good source for restaurant recommendations," she said. He left. The two men followed. The restaurant quietly resumed being a restaurant. Sound filling back in like water finding its level. Conversation resuming with the deliberate normalcy of people who had just collectively agreed not to have seen anything. Nkechi sat at the table and finished her water and waited for her food to be wrapped. She did not allow herself to fully process what had just happened until she was outside on the pavement, the container in her hands, the cold January air of Gangnam arriving with complete commitment. Then she took out her phone. She typed, "Table. I'm members only." His personal table, always reserved, not a standing reservation. Two men, professional distance, did not move unless spoken to. Entire room responded without being asked. Name, Seong-jae. Find. She walked to the subway with her dagalbi. She did not look back at the restaurant. She would later wish she had, because someone inside it was already on the phone, and the call was not going to the police. If you are already feeling something about this woman who sat at the wrong table and refused to apologize for it, I need you to hit that subscribe button right now. Like this video so more people find Nkechi. Share it with someone who understands what it means to walk into a room and refuse to shrink, and then come right back, because we are just getting started. His full name was Jang Sung-jae. She found this in 4 hours. and which was slower than she liked but considerably faster than most people could manage with less to go on. He was 38. He ran a holding company called JSJ Capital, publicly registered interests across hospitality, logistics, private equity, clean corporate structure, competent legal architecture. His name appeared in 14 business publications over the past 3 years, always photographed the same way: composed, direct, unreadable. The kind of face that professional photography could not make readable because there was simply nothing visible to read. What he also ran, according to two sources she had spent 22 months cultivating on the organized crime beat in Seoul, was the Eastern Operational Network of the Jang Syndicate, third generation. His grandfather had built it in the chaos of post-war reconstruction. When his father had expanded it into the legitimate economy, Seong-jae had done something more dangerous than either. He had made it look like the legitimate economy, so thoroughly that distinguishing one from the other required the kind of sustained, specific attention that most institutions did not have the patience to maintain. He was not someone you accidentally sat across from at dinner. Except she had. She sat at her kitchen table at midnight with her notes spread in front of her and the remaining dakgalbi in the fridge, and she thought about the way he had looked at her. Not threatening. Not what she would have expected. Something she still could not name. The quality of a man who has encountered an unexpected thing and is examining it with unhurried thoroughness from a position of complete security. Unlike she was a variable that had appeared in an equation he had considered fully solved, and he was working out what the equation now meant rather than how to remove the variable. She called her editor in Lagos. His name was Tunde. He had been on the crime beat for 22 years across 3 continents, and he did not panic about anything. "I sat across from Jang Seong-jae at dinner tonight," she said, by accident. Pause. "Define accident," Tunde said. "I used a false reservation to get into a members-only restaurant, and it turned out to be his personal table." Another pause. Longer. "Nkechi. I know. You sat at the private table of a man who controls the eastern half of Seoul's organized crime infrastructure. I told him I needed the dakgalbi, and I was honest about the important part. This is not funny. It's a little funny. Does he know who you are?" She thought about the examination. The quality of it she could not name. "Not yet." "Then you have a window," Tunde said, shifting into the register he used when he was doing serious thinking. "I need you to consider carefully whether you want to use it, because there is no middle position on Yang Seong-jae." She looked at her notes, at his name, at 22 months of work building toward a shape that had not yet fully formed. "I want to use it," she said. "Then be smart," Tunde said. "Be careful, and do not go back to that restaurant." She had every sincere intention of being smart and careful. The problem with intentions was that they were formed before the situation had introduced its full self. As she went back 6 days later, what she did not know, what she would not know for another 3 weeks, was that going back had never been her own idea. Someone had made sure she would. She gave it 6 days, filed an unrelated story about procurement irregularities in Incheon, worked out every morning, called her mother in Lagos, and talked for an hour about everything except this. She thought carefully about professional risk and personal risk and the meaningful distinction between them, and she wrote the distinction in her notebook and looked at it for a long time, and then went back to the restaurant anyway. On a Friday evening, she put on the dress she wore when she needed to walk into a room as the most composed version of herself. Dark green wrap dress. On the one that understood her body's proportions and worked with them instead of against them. The one she had bought in Nairobi from a seamstress who had taken one look at her and said, "I know exactly what you need." She wore her hair down. She put on earrings that were not small. She looked at herself in the mirror and she said, to no one in particular, "You are a journalist doing your job." Then she went. She gave the host a different name at the door. She was seated, not at his table. A different one, smaller, near the window. She ordered the dakgalbi. She was halfway through it, genuinely still extraordinary, the gochujang exactly right. The kind of food that makes you understand why someone would lie about their name to obtain it. When she became aware that someone had sat down across from her without making any of the sounds that sitting usually makes. She looked up. Jang Seong-jae looked back at her. He was not in a suit this time. Dark coat, open collar. He looked like a man who had decided to come somewhere and had not spent significant time deciding what to wear to do it. He looked like himself in a way that the restaurant version of him, with all the architecture around it, had not quite allowed. "You came back," he said. "The dagalbi is exceptional." He looked at her plate, then back at her face. Something moved through his expression, brief, calibrated, and she understood she was being assessed again, but differently than the first time. The first time he had been deciding what she was. This time he seemed to already know and was deciding something else entirely. "You used another name," he said. "I use several. Which one is real?" She had made a decision in the 6 days between visits, a careful, professional decision about exactly how much truth to give and when. She had turned it over from every angle, examined it for risk, and arrived at the same answer each time. She delivered it now with the directness she gave everything that mattered. "Nkechi Oduya, I'm a journalist." The silence that followed was different in quality from the one 6 days ago. Fuller, more aware, the kind of silence that forms when two people have simultaneously understood that the conversation they are about to have is not one either of them can take back. He did not move. One did not look at his men, did not call the host, did not do any of the things a man with his architecture might reasonably be expected to do when a journalist told him to his face, at his personal table in his private restaurant, that she had come back a second time after the first meeting. "What do you write about?" he said. "Organized crime, currently Seoul, previously Lagos, Nairobi, Abidjan. And you sat at my table. By accident the first time, this time on purpose." Something happened in his face, the brief and gone thing she had first seen 6 days ago, and she was starting to understand that it was not suppression, not the absence of a reaction, but the actual thing. Brief because it was real. Real things moved quickly through him. "Why come back?" he said. "Oh, you had everything you needed from the first visit." "Because you didn't have me removed the first time," she said. "You could have. The room was watching to see what you would do and you didn't do it. That's information." She picked up her glass. "I'm building a story, not about you specifically, about the structure, the way legitimate corporate architecture is used to route things that aren't legitimate. I've been building it for 2 years. I have most of what I need." She set the glass down. "I'm not recording this. I'm telling you because you didn't have me removed, and I think you deserve to know what you're looking at." "Why does what I deserve matter to you?" "It doesn't professionally," she said honestly. "Personally, I was raised to be direct with people even when it makes things complicated." He looked at her. Not the assessment from the first visit, something slower, something she was not going to name. "You're going to publish this story?" "Yes." "And you came here to tell me?" "I came for the dagalbi," she said. "And to tell you, both things are true at the same time." He was quiet for a moment. In the restaurant around them, Seoul's most careful people ate their careful dinners and did not look at this table. Then, "Finish your food." He stood. He looked at her one final time, that quality again, the one she had no name for, and he left. The two men followed. The restaurant resumed its correct silence. Her phone buzzed 30 seconds later. Unknown number. "You have interesting instincts, Nkechi Oduya." She stared at the message, typed back. "How did you get this number?" 3 seconds. "I'm good at finding things people are trying not to name directly." She put the phone face down on the table, picked it up, put it down again, typed. "That was my line." No response for a long moment. Just the 3 dots appearing and disappearing twice. Then nothing. She finished the dagalbi. She walked home through the Seoul night, past the Han River glittering cold and indifferent, past the neon of Mapo-gu going about its Friday business, with the particular internal hum of a journalist who has gone looking for one story and found something else entirely sitting inside it. She did not yet know that the something else had found her first, and that it had been waiting for 11 months. The messages continued, not frequently, not in any pattern she could track. Every 2 or 3 days, on something from the number she saved as JSJ, just his company initials, which was entirely professional, and she was aware of how thin that reasoning was becoming. The first came 2 days after the restaurant. He had found a factual error in a story she had published 8 months ago, a subsidiary name she had attributed to the wrong parent company, a mistake that had cleared her editor and 2 legal reads and had sat unnoticed in the published version ever since. She stared at the correction for a long time, then typed, "Why are you reading my work from 8 months ago?" He wrote, "I read everything you've published since you moved to Seoul." She put the phone down, picked it up, typed, "That is a significant amount of reading." He wrote, "You write about things that matter. It seemed worth the time." She corrected the error in the published piece. She did not tell her editor where the catch had come from. She filed that detail in the same place she was filing everything about Yang Seong-jae, a folder in her mind labeled "Things I Have Not Resolved Yet," which was getting full. 4 days later came the financial regulation exchange. He had a question about a specific provision of Korean financial law she had referenced in a published piece. Precise, careful, exactly the question of a man who had been thinking carefully about implications and wanted to understand them completely. She answered it. He asked a follow-up. She answered that too. Then another, then this, one which she did not expect. JSJ, the mechanism you described in paragraph 4, the double reporting provision, would only apply if the subsidiary was registered before the 2019 revision. Most journalists miss this. You didn't. She stared at the message for a long time, typed, "You know Korean financial regulation well enough to catch that." He wrote, "I know it well enough to know how to use it. That's different from understanding it the way you do." She typed, "What do you mean?" He wrote, "You understand it from the outside, what it was designed to protect. I understand it from the inside, what it can be made to do. You see the law, I see the architecture around the law. Between the two, there's a version of the truth that neither of us has alone." She put the phone down, sat with that for a long time, then picked it up and typed, "That is the most honest thing anyone in your position has ever said to me." He wrote, "I find honesty efficient." She typed, "Most people in your world find it expensive." He wrote, "Most people in my world have something they need to hide. I have something I am trying to build. Those are different problems." She had no professional response to that. She filed it in the unresolved folder. By the end of that exchange, 12 messages, 40 minutes, he had given her, entirely without seeming to intend to, a structural detail about the way a particular corporate routing worked that redirected the secondary thread of her story and saved her approximately 3 weeks of work. She sat with the specific discomfort of that for a long time. The source and the story were not supposed to overlap this way. And the lines were moving and she knew it, and she was going to be honest with herself about it. The third message thread came a week later, a single sentence. The story about the Incheon contracts. "Your editor cut the 4th paragraph. The version you filed was better." She typed, "How do you know my editor cut the 4th paragraph?" He wrote, "I read the published version and then I read what the paragraph was probably going to say, based on what came before and after it. Then I guessed your editor cut it for legal caution and that you were frustrated about it." She typed, "You guessed correctly," he wrote. The next version shouldn't need to cut it. She went for a walk around her neighborhood and did not pick up her phone for an hour. She was a journalist, 9 years. She knew exactly what was happening. And a man who was reading her work with more care than most of her readers, noticing the places where she had been constrained or frustrated, or had left something on the floor, treating her as someone whose work deserved that kind of attention. She was not indifferent to that. She was going to be honest about it rather than pretend she was. Then came the conversation that changed the texture of everything. It started at 10 p.m. on a Wednesday. Not a question about her work this time. Just this. "You said Lagos felt like a city that refused to be managed. What did you mean by that?" She stared at the message, then typed, "Why?" He wrote, "I have been to 41 cities for work. Most of them feel like cities. Lagos felt like something else. I am trying to understand what." She thought about this. Mine then. Lagos is a city that decided a long time ago that it was not interested in being legible to outsiders. It would rather be itself completely than be understood partially. Most cities want to be read. Lagos wants to be survived. And if you survive it, it gives you something no other city can. The specific confidence of someone who has been inside something ungovernable and come out the other side still standing. He did not respond for 4 minutes, long enough that she put the phone down. Then, "That is exactly it. I spent 3 days there and I could not name it." "You named it in 4 sentences." She typed, "You spent 3 days in Lagos." He wrote, "Yes." She typed, "For business." A pause, longer than usual. Then, not entirely. She held her phone and looked at that message, and she made a decision not to ask the follow-up question. "I'm not tonight." Some questions open doors that cannot be closed back, and she was not ready to open that one yet. She typed, "The city has that effect. People go for one reason and come back changed by a different one." He wrote, "Yes, that is what happened." Neither of them said anything for another few minutes. Then he wrote, "Do you miss it?" She thought about this honestly, thought about the plantain woman, senator, the particular weight of a Lagos morning heavy and alive, then typed, "Every day, but Seoul is where the story is, and the story is what I came for." He wrote, "And after the story?" She typed, "There is always another story." He wrote, "That is not what I asked." She put the phone down, stared at the ceiling, picked it back up, typed, "I know, I'm not ready to answer the actual question yet." A pause, then, "Okay, one word. I'm from a man who used minimum language." And she sat with that one word, the acceptance in it, the lack of pressure, the fact that he had asked and received a non-answer and had simply acknowledged it. And she understood that the unresolved folder was going to need a second page. Once, at 11 at night on a Tuesday, he sent a photograph, no message, just a photograph of a street in Lagos, neon and rain and the magnificent particular chaos of a city that had never once agreed to be managed. She recognized the district. Not her street, but close. She typed, "Why did you send me this?" He wrote, "I was going through photographs from the trip. I wanted to know if this was your street." It was not her street. Her street was 2 districts over. It had the plantain woman and senator and a particular quality of morning light that arrived differently than anywhere else she had ever lived. She typed, "Not my street. Mine has better plantain." He wrote, "I'll find it." She put the phone face down on the table. The specific feeling of a woman whose professional discipline was excellent and whose personal situation was becoming a completely different kind of story. She chose to be honest about it rather than pretend it was not happening. What she did not know, what she could not have known, was that when Jang Seong-jae had been in Lagos the previous month, he had not gone for business at all. He had gone because someone had suggested it, specifically, by name, the street, the district, the fact that a journalist named Nkechi Oduya had worked there for 6 years before moving to Seoul. One that someone was not anyone she had ever been introduced to, and she was not going to meet her for another week. In a compound in Cheongdam-dong, a woman named Jang Mirai was reviewing a file she had commissioned 11 months ago. 11 months, before the restaurant, before the false reservation, before her son had ever sat down across from a woman eating dagalbi at his personal table. His personal table, which he had been asked to visit that evening by Mirai's assistant, who had told him quietly that a scheduling conflict had delayed his actual dinner guest. The table would be empty for 40 minutes. He should go early. The table had not been empty. Mirai turned the page. She was 71 years old and she had run the actual operations of the Yang family, not the visible surface, on the real machinery, since her husband died 18 years ago. She had raised Seong-jae to be precisely what he was, controlled, effective, loyal to the structure above everything, without the vanity that ruined men who acquired power young. She had done this with the specific love of a woman who understood that in their world, sentimentality was the most expensive thing you could afford. She had not, in 35 years, made a significant decision without first understanding what she was deciding about. Nkechi Oduya had been building a story about the Jang family for 22 months. Mirai had known about the story for 18 of them. She had 3 times had the option to close it down, through legal pressure, through source management, and through the quieter tools available to someone with her resources, and 3 times she had chosen not to. Because the file on Nkechi Oduya was the most interesting file Mirai had read in a decade. She had read it slowly, not for weakness, for truth. She had spent 50 years learning the difference. 2 stories Nkechi had killed to protect people who would never know she had killed them. Not because an editor had asked, not because of legal risk, because she had made the call herself, absorbed the professional cost without explanation, and moved forward. One source she had protected publicly at significant professional cost. One direct threat she had reported and then filed the story 3 days later anyway. A journalist who killed her own stories to protect people she would never meet. One and then filed the ones that needed to be filed regardless of what it cost her personally. Mireille had sat with this for a very long time. The intelligence picture was of a woman who was precise, driven, professionally fearless, and in possession of a specific kind of personal integrity that was not performed for any audience. The integrity was simply there. It was structural. It was part of how she was built. Then she had called Baek Hyun, her executive assistant, her most trusted instrument for 11 years, and she had said very quietly, "Arrange for Seong-jae to be at the restaurant on the 14th. Make sure she is already seated." Hyun had said, "You want him to meet her." Mirai had said, "I want to see what he does when he does." What he had done was not have her removed. And what he had done was give her his personal number 30 seconds after leaving the table. What he had done, over the next 3 weeks, was conduct 41 messages with a woman who was actively building a story to publish about his family. 41 messages, from a man who communicated in the minimum language required for any purpose, and had in 11 years never given his personal number to anyone who was not operationally necessary. Mireille turned the last page of the updated file. The messages, all 41, printed in sequence. She read them once, then again. She stopped at the Lagos exchange, read it 3 times. Then she put the file down and looked at the wall ahead of her for a long time. She had arranged for a journalist to sit at her son's table because she needed someone with structural integrity inside the architecture she was trying to build. She had not arranged for her son to fall in love with that journalist over a discussion about what makes Lagos ungovernable. She had not planned for this part. She was, for the first time in a very long time, not entirely in control of what she had started. Then she picked up her phone and typed 4 words to an unknown number. "We need to talk." The response came in 8 seconds. It was not from Nkechi. It was from Baek Hyun. He wrote, "She filed the story 20 minutes ago, and there is something else. Something I found in the source verification. You need to see this before she does." Mireille was very still. She typed, "Come now." What Hyun brought her that night was not a complication. It was a catastrophe, and it was going to change everything. Nkechi filed at 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday. It published at midnight Seoul time. By 6 a.m., it had 40,000 reads. By noon, it had been picked up by 3 major international outlets. By evening, it was the kind of story that does not just report on a structure, but changes the shape of the conversation that the structure had been designed to prevent from happening. She sat in her apartment and watched the numbers climb. She ate jollof rice from her mother's recipe that she had made on Tuesday, the particular comfort food of a woman who had learned in Nairobi, and then Lagos, and then Abidjan, and then Seoul, that your mother's recipe is the thing you make when you have done something that costs you something, weighing so that you can eat it and sit with what it cost and not be alone in the sitting. She did not look at her phone for 2 hours. When she looked, there was nothing from JSJ. She waited. The threat arrived at 11:02 p.m., not from an unknown number, from an email address built specifically for this purpose and designed not to exist by morning. 3 lines. It told her what she had published. It told her what publishing had cost certain people. It told her that the cost would be redistributed. She forwarded it to Tunda, to her legal contact at the outlet, and to the Korean Police Cybercrime Unit contact she had been cultivating for 2 years, specifically for situations like this. She did all of this in the correct order without hurrying. One with the professional calm of someone who had received versions of this message before and understood its architecture completely. Then she sat and looked at the wall. 9 years, 4 countries. The message was always the same message. Someone angry, someone with resources, the belief that a journalist is a problem that can be solved by making the journalist afraid. She had always been difficult to make afraid. Her phone rang. JSJ. An actual call, the first time. She answered. "You received something," he said. "Yes. I know who sent it." His voice was controlled, more controlled than she had ever heard it, which meant something was underneath the control that was working very hard to stay underneath it. It will not be repeated. Seong-jae, I'm not managing the consequences of your work, he said, and as if he had already anticipated the objection and prepared for it before he dialed. I'm managing the behavior of someone in my proximity who made a decision I did not authorize and would not have authorized. That is something I am responsible for regardless of you. She sat with the distinction. It was a real one. She could see it was a real one, and she was not going to pretend otherwise, just to make this simpler than it was. Who sent it? She said. A pause, longer than she expected. Someone I trusted, he said. The weight in those 3 words was specific, not the weight of a threat, the weight of a named thing, a specific betrayal rather than a general one. Someone close to you. Yes. Seong-jae, who sent it? The silence on the line was the longest he had ever given her. Once she sat in her apartment and she waited, and she did not fill the silence because she had learned in 9 years that the silence before the answer is part of the answer. My operations director, he said finally, a man I have worked with for 11 years. She absorbed this. Why would your operations director threaten the journalist who published a story about your family? A pause. Because, he said, and she could hear him choosing each word with the care of someone delivering something that cannot be taken back. He is also the man who fed you the information that became your third source. The coffee shop on a Wednesday morning came back to her. The municipal licensing audit. The thread she had followed that had connected to a name from a document photographed 8 months ago in a Uido archive. On the connection that had arrived with that specific sudden completeness, the feeling every journalist knows, that tells you the structure is whole. He gave me the third source, she said. He gave you information that was accurate, Seong-jae said carefully. And then he sent you a threat. Not because he feared exposure, because he had used you to target a rival faction inside the organization, and the story accomplished what he needed it to accomplish. A long pause. You were not reporting a story, Nkechi. You were a weapon. You were the most precise weapon available to him because you verified everything and you could not be bought, and he knew that your integrity would make the story irrefutable. Another pause. And you did not know it. The apartment was very quiet around her. She had spent 22 months on this story. On 3 sources, legal review, 2 years of building something she believed in completely. The story is still true, she said. Her voice was steady. It was always steady. Every word, he said immediately. I want to be absolutely clear about this. He did not give you false information. He gave you real information and directed you toward it carefully, and let your integrity and your skill do everything else. The story is correct, and it belongs to the public, and nothing about that changes. A pause. But you deserve to know what you were standing inside. She sat with this, with the full weight of it. She had been right about everything, and she had been used. Both things were true at the same time. And in sitting in the quiet of her apartment at midnight with the story running across 3 international outlets, and the threat sitting in her email, and the phone warm against her ear, she understood something she had not had language for before this moment. The most dangerous thing about having structural integrity is that it can be weaponized by someone who knows you well enough to understand that you will not compromise it. Her inability to be bought, her commitment to verification, her refusal to protect powerful people. These were not just her values. They were, to someone calculating enough, tools. She had been excellent, and she had been played with her own excellence. Are you safe? He said. The same words from before, but different now. I'm different in the specific way that words change meaning when the person saying them has stayed on the line through the hardest part. Yes, she said. Good. Seong-jae, the man who sent the threat, what happens to him? A pause. He is no longer my operations director. That's not what I asked. No, he said, it isn't. The call ended. She sat in the quiet for a long moment. Then she opened her laptop and looked at the story one more time. At 22 months of work, at 3 verified sources, one of whom had used her as a precision instrument and had never intended for her to know it. The story was still true. She was going to hold on to that. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. 4 words. We need to talk. She did not respond. 47 seconds later. My name is Jang Mirai. I am Seong-jae's mother. And I'm not contacting you to threaten you. I am calling because my son has not slept in 2 days, and I need you to understand something before we meet. Something that concerns you specifically, something you do not yet know. Nkechi read it twice, 3 times. There was a fourth line, added after a pause long enough to feel deliberate. What I have to tell you will change what you think this story was. I owe you that before you decide what you do with it. She called Tunde. The mother texted me, she said. Define texted. Personally, from her own number. She says she has something I don't know yet. Something that changes what I think the story was. A very long silence. Nkechi, Tunde said. I know. The most dangerous woman in that organization has personally contacted you at midnight to tell you your own story isn't what you think it is. That is an accurate summary. What are you going to do? She looked at the message. At the city outside her window, Seoul at midnight, indifferent and magnificent and lit up and full of things she had not found yet. I'm going to meet her, she said. Nkechi. Tunde. I sat at his table by accident and ate his food and refused to apologize, and he gave me his personal number. I filed a story about his family, and he told me to file it. His mother is texting me at midnight, and she says she has something I don't know. She paused. This is not a situation I can manage with normal tools. I have decided to stop trying. A very long silence. Be smart, Tunde said. Always. Be careful. Always. She sent Jang Mireille one message. Tell me when and where. The response came in 40 seconds. Tomorrow, lunch, come alone. I will also be alone. This is not a condition. It is a courtesy. She saved the number as JM. She did not sleep. Not because she was afraid, because she was a journalist who had just been told that the story she had spent 2 years building was not quite the story she thought it was, and she needed to understand what that meant before she walked into a room with the woman who had known it all along. Jang Mireille's home was in a part of Seoul that did not appear on the maps tourists used. A private residential compound above Bukhansan, walled and composed, the kind of property that communicates its seriousness by having nothing to announce. Nkechi arrived in a taxi. And she had sent the full address to Tunde with the instruction, if I don't check in by 3 p.m., this is where I went. She did this calmly and without drama because it was the correct professional protocol, and she was always going to follow the correct professional protocol, regardless of how she felt about a situation. She was shown in without words to a room that looked like a sitting room in a house where sitting rooms were taken seriously, not decorated for impression, furnished for living. Things chosen across decades rather than purchased at once. A low table, tea already arranged, the quiet of a space that had held significant conversations before and had learned to carry them without showing it. Jang Mireille was already seated. She was not what Nkechi had assembled from 11 years of reading intelligence on powerful families. And she was small, not frail, nothing about her suggested frailty in any form, but smaller than expected, with the compact, permanent authority of a woman who had never needed physical size to fill a room because she had found a different way to fill it decades ago and had been using it ever since. 71 years old, wearing it without apology or concealment. Her eyes were the same quality as her son's, that specific, measuring steadiness that looked at things directly and registered them completely and gave back only what it chose to. She looked at Nkechi for a moment. Then she said, You're more beautiful than the photograph. I've heard that before, Nkechi said, usually from people who are establishing a position before the real conversation begins. Something moved in Mireille's face, and something that was not quite a smile but was clearly in its vicinity. Sit down, Nkechi Oduya. Nkechi sat. She was a tall woman with the kind of figure that entered rooms. Full hips, strong shoulders, a body that had always known exactly what it was and had stopped apologizing for any of it sometime around the age of 25 in Lagos, when she had decided that life was too short and the work too important for that particular distraction. She sat across from Jang Mireille, and she looked at her directly, and she did not perform anything. Tea was poured. It was extraordinary. Nkechi noted this as a pattern in this family that she was going to need to think about. You published a story last night, Mireille said. Wow, that has caused significant disruption to structures my family has maintained for 35 years. Yes. You built it over 2 years with 3 verified sources. I always verify everything. One of those sources, Mireille said, with the quiet of someone delivering the sentence they have been building toward since before you arrived, was Baek Hyun. Nkechi went still. My executive assistant, Mireille said, my most trusted instrument for 11 years, the man who arranged for my son to be at the restaurant the evening you were there. She paused. The municipal licensing audit, the thread you followed to the Yoedo archive. He left it for you, not as a trail, as a breadcrumb. He had been feeding you precisely calibrated information for 8 months, building toward your third source. Nkechi looked at the table, at her hands, on at the tea. He was not your source, Mireille said. He was your architect. And the rival faction, Nkechi said. Her voice was steady. It was always steady. He used the story to eliminate them. Through your credibility, through your verification, through your integrity, which he correctly calculated was unimpeachable, and therefore the most powerful weapon available to him. Mireille paused. He used the best of you to accomplish the worst of what he intended. I want you to understand that I understand what that is. You knew, Nkechi said. Not when he was doing it, Mireille said. I knew after, 3 weeks ago when I found what he had built. I had a choice at that point. Suppress the story, or let you publish. You let me publish. The story deserved to be published, Mireille said. When the family deserved to answer for what the story described, and you deserved to publish what you had built, even if you did not know everything you were building inside. She paused. I made a decision that took your choice away. You may feel that was a violation. I would understand that. Nkechi held her gaze for a long moment. You could have told me, she said, before I filed. Yes, Mireille said. I chose not to, because if I had, you would have had to decide whether to publish knowing that a source had manipulated the delivery of the information. That decision, with all its professional consequences, would have fallen entirely on you. I made it for you. A pause. I do not regret it, but I am not going to pretend it was not a decision made at your expense. Baek Hyun sent the threat, Nkechi said. Lang yes. And Seong-jae handled it. My son had been watching Hyun for months, Mireille said, suspecting something he could not yet name. Your story gave him certainty. Hyun's threat gave him proof. The situation resolved itself through you in a way I had not planned but could not have planned better if I had tried. She paused. I have been doing this for 50 years. Sometimes the things you cannot plan are the only things that actually work. Nkechi sat with all of this, the full weight of it, 22 months reassembling from the inside out. Why did you arrange for him to meet me? She said. Mireille put down her cup. She looked at the woman across the table, this journalist who had walked into her son's restaurant under a false name and eaten his food and filed a story about her family and had still, and by some specific gravity Mireille was only now beginning to fully understand, ended up here. And she did what she had done with everything that mattered for 50 years. She assessed it completely, not for weakness, for truth. Because I had read your file, Mireille said. The stories you killed, the source you protected at your own professional cost, the threat you reported and then filed the story 3 days later anyway. I needed to understand if you were real. She paused. Not if you were good. I already knew you were good. I needed to understand if the goodness was structural, whether it held under conditions that made it expensive. And you decided to test it by placing me in front of your son. I decided to see what happened when two people with structural integrity encountered each other, Mireille said. I arranged for the encounter. Oh, I did not arrange for what came after. That was entirely theirs. The meeting today? Nkechi said slowly. You said you had something I didn't know. I have told you most of it. Most? Mireille was quiet for a moment. Then, the first time you called the restaurant, the reservation line, the woman who told you there were no tables and then, 12 minutes later, gave a table to Park Soo-jin of the Seoul Cultural Affairs Office. A pause. That woman was not a hostess. Nkechi looked at her. She was mine, Mireille said. She knew your name before you called. She was waiting for it. When you called back as Park Soo-jin, she gave you the table because I had asked her to give you a table if you found a way to ask for one. A pause. I wanted to see what kind of person you were when an obstacle presented itself. When the answer told me everything I needed to know. The room held this. This meeting, Nkechi said carefully. Is it also a test? Mirai looked at her with the eyes that were the same quality as her son's. Yes, she said. There is a person in this house who has been reporting to my son in real time since you arrived. Nkechi absorbed this without moving. Did I pass? She said. Something moved in Mirai's face, the full version of the thing that had been almost a smile for the past hour. You passed, she said, when I told you about Hyun and you said the story is still true. Most people, receiving that information, would have been too angry to see clearly. You saw clearly first. She paused. That is the whole thing. What do you want from me? Nkechi said. Not what you want for your son. What do you, Jong Mirai, want from this conversation? Mirai looked at her directly. I want you to know exactly what you are standing inside before my son makes you a proposal. Not what it looks like from outside, what it actually is. What kind of proposal? He will tell you himself, Mirai said. But I want you to know this first. I did not arrange the restaurant so my son would fall in love with a journalist. She paused, the word love sitting in the room between them like something that had been said out loud for the first time. I arranged it because I needed someone with structural integrity inside the architecture I am trying to build. I needed someone whose yes means yes and whose no means no, regardless of what it costs. Another pause. I got considerably more than I planned for. Nkechi held her gaze for a long moment. There will be others around us, Mirai said, who will not make the choice I am making. People who have protected this family for a long time, who will see you as the story you filed and nothing more. I need you to understand that I understand what I am choosing. Are you telling me you won't interfere? I am telling you, Mirai said precisely, that I am choosing consciously not to interfere. One is absence, the other is a decision. I want you to know it is a decision. Why does it matter that I know? Because you are a woman who needs to know what she is standing inside, Mirai said, and because my son has not slept in 2 days, and because I have been in this life long enough to know that the only things which actually survive are the things that are real? She looked at Nkechi directly. What is happening between you and Seongjai has the quality of something real. I distrust real things. Real things cannot be controlled, and I have built everything on control. But I am not going to insult either of us by pretending the distrust changes what I can see. Nkechi sat with this. Try the rice cake, Mirai said. I had it made this morning. It was extraordinary. Everything in this family placed on a table was extraordinary, and Nkechi had stopped deciding whether this was a good sign or the most sophisticated influence she had ever encountered. She chose to believe it was a good sign, consciously, with full awareness of the choice, because some things need to be chosen before they can become certain. She stayed 2 hours, and they talked about journalism and what it costs a woman to build authority in a world with strong opinions about where women should stand. Mirai talked about this with the specificity of someone who had paid the full price across 5 decades and had long since stopped arguing with the invoice. When Nkechi stood to leave, Mirai walked her to the door. At the threshold, she stopped. One more thing, she said. My son is going to make you a proposal. Not a romantic one, a different kind. When he does, I want you to know that I am not standing behind it. A pause. I am standing beside it. That is the closest thing to approval I have given anything in quite some time. The door closed quietly behind her. Nkechi stood on the path in the cold air for a moment. The hill was bare above the city. Seoul was below, or immense and going about its Thursday business. She walked down the path toward the gate. At the gate, her phone buzzed. Seongjai, my mother contacted you, she typed. She did. Seongjai, I didn't ask her to. She typed, she told me. She was very clear it was her own decision. A pause. Then, what did she say? Nkechi looked back up at the house on the hill, at the city below. She typed. She said she is standing beside something, not behind it, beside it. The typing indicator appeared, disappeared, appeared again and stayed longer than usual. Then, that is the most she has ever given anyone. Then, after another pause, Saturday morning, if that works. She typed, Saturday morning. She put the phone in her pocket and walked out into the street. And Saturday arrived with the specific clarity that Seoul gets in January when the sky is clean and the cold is honest about itself. Nkechi was on her second cup of coffee when he texted that he was downstairs. She had been up since 6. She had been reading something on her laptop that had nothing to do with him, and she was entirely comfortable with this information about herself. She went downstairs. He was standing on the pavement outside her building in a coat built for actual winter, hands in his pockets. Without the restaurant and the suit and the two men at professional distance, he looked like a person. Just a person on a pavement on a Saturday morning in Seoul. She registered this and noted it and kept it. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," he said. They stood for a moment on the pavement in the January cold. "On it's this way," she said. She walked. He walked beside her, not behind her, not ahead of her. Beside. She noted this. The street was 3 minutes from her building, and it was exactly what she had described. The woman with the cart was already set up, charcoal going, the smell of fried plantain reaching them half a block before they arrived. Senator was there, sitting beside the cart with the proprietary calm of a dog who has decided this territory is his and has never once been successfully challenged on the point. She ordered plantain. He looked at the cart and ordered the same, which the woman received with the particular pleasure of a vendor who appreciates a customer who does not make unnecessary decisions about unfamiliar food. They ate standing on the pavement in the cold. And Senator assessed Seong-jae with unhurried thoroughness, the considered judgment of someone whose opinion carried genuine weight on this block, and then moved approximately 4 inches closer to him. "He likes you," Nkechi said. He moved closer. "That is the highest honor available on this street." He looked down at the dog. Something moved in his face, the thing she had spent weeks trying to name, clearer here in the plain morning light without the restaurant and the architecture and the weight of everything around him. She understood now what it was. Not performance, not calculation. Just presence. Complete, unhurried presence. A man who had built everything he was required to be and had kept underneath it carefully the person he actually was. She had seen it in the messages. In I find honesty efficient and I have something I am trying to build. In okay. One word accepting a non-answer without pressure. In the Lagos photograph sent at 11 at night for no reason except that a city had moved him and he thought it might be her street. "I have a proposal," he said. She looked at him. "Your mother warned me." "My mother warned you." "She said it wasn't a romantic one, a different kind." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "She was right." Nkechi waited. "The structure I run is going to change," he said carefully. "Not because of the story accelerated a timeline I was already working on. I have been building an exit from the operational side for 4 years. The story makes it faster. There are things I am unwilling to continue and I am in the process of ending them. You're getting out. I have been getting out for 4 years. I am now accelerating it. What does that have to do with a proposal?" He looked at her directly. "The legitimate side, JSJ Capital, the hospitality group, the logistics infrastructure, those are real businesses that employ real people. Part of what I am building is a different architecture for those businesses. More transparent, more accountable." He paused. "I want to create an internal accountability function. Someone who reports to no one inside the company. Full access to every structure, every decision, every account. And someone who can see the full picture and who has the professional integrity to report what they find regardless of what it costs." The Saturday morning moved around them. Senator had settled against Seong-jae's left leg with the air of someone making a long-term commitment. "You're asking me," Nkechi said. "I'm asking you. To work inside your company. To work independent of my company with access to it." Seong-jae. "I know what it sounds like," he said. "I know the professional complications. I know it is the most inconvenient thing I could ask." He looked at her. "I am asking it because you are the only person I have encountered whose integrity is structural. Not performed, not conditional. Simply there, and I need someone whose integrity is structural." A pause. "When and because my mother suggested it." "Your mother suggested it. She read your file, the 2 stories you killed to protect people who would never know. She brought them to me and said, 'This is the person you need watching your work.' I had reached the same conclusion. She arrived first." He paused. "She usually does." Nkechi stood on the pavement with soul going on around her in every direction. She thought about 22 months of a story she had built correctly, about being used and being seen, and the difference between those two things, and how it was possible to have experienced both from inside the same work. About a woman who had stood beside something for 11 months before she had any idea it was happening. About a man who had told her to file the story and had meant it. Still meant it. The story, she said. I mean, whatever it costs you, I need you to not regret it. I told you to file it. I need you to still mean that. Now. He looked at her with the thing she had finally named. I mean it now, he said. I will mean it in 3 weeks. I will mean it in 3 years. The story exists because it should exist. That is not something I would unmake. A pause. Even knowing what Hyun did, even knowing how it was built, what you built was real. How it reached you does not change what it was. She looked at him for a long moment in the January morning light. I need time, she said. Take whatever you need. I need to talk to my editor. Of course. And I need you to understand that if I accept, I will report what I find. Everything, regardless of what it is. I know, he said. That is why I am asking you and not someone else. That is the entire reason. He held her gaze. I am trying to build something clean. I need someone who cannot be made to look the other way. You are constitutionally incapable of looking the other way. A pause. That is not an insult. That is the requirement. Senator pressed slightly harder against Seong-jae's left leg. Saturday morning, Nkechi said, was a very dramatic time to make this proposal. I've been waiting for the right moment for 3 weeks, he said. Senator seemed like a good sign. She looked at the dog. Senator looked back with the profound satisfaction of someone whose judgment had once again proven correct. I'll let you know by Wednesday, she said. Wednesday, he said. They walked back to her building. At the door she stopped. Your mother, she said. 11 months, the restaurant, the hostess, on all of it. She looked at him. Did you know? He was quiet. Not about the arrangement, he said. I sat down at that table because I was told to go early. I did not know why. I did not know she had planned any of it. A pause. I found out 3 days ago. How did it feel, finding out? He looked at her with the thing she had finally named. Like being told that something you thought you chose was chosen for you, he said, and then realizing that the choosing happened anyway, that whatever I did from the moment I sat down was mine. He held her gaze. She put me in the room. Everything after was me. She stood on the pavement in the January morning light and she held that. She put it in the same place as, I find honesty efficient, and I have something I am trying to build, and file the story, it's yours, and okay. I'll let you know Wednesday, she said. She went inside. On Wednesday morning she called Tunde at 6. I've made a decision, she said. I know, he said. You know? You didn't call me Tuesday night to talk yourself out of it. You always call me Tuesday night when you're going to say no to something. She sat with this. Be smart, he said. Always. Be careful. Always. Come back with a better story than you left with. That is the plan, she said. She called Seong-jae at 9 a.m. He answered on the first ring. Yes, she said. A pause, then quietly. Yes. One word, from a man who had spent his entire life using the minimum language required for any purpose, who had read 8 months of her work before sitting down across from her, who had told her to file the story and meant it completely. One who had stood on a Lagos street at some point she would never fully know the story of and taken a photograph of a city he could not name and sent it to her at 11 at night. One word was entirely enough. She looked out her window at Seoul, cold and clear in the Wednesday morning light. Below on the corner, the plantain woman was setting up her cart. Senator was already in position. She had turned toward the wrong table by accident. Or she had been placed inside the story she was always meant to find. Both things were true at the same time. She had stopped trying to decide which one mattered more. Some things you do not choose. Some things choose you and then wait, quietly, for 11 months, for you to find your way to them. And when you finally do, When you are sitting in a taxi watching Seoul go past the window, and are standing on a pavement in January cold with plantain in your hand and a dog making his decision about you, you understand that the not choosing was never the point. The point was always the turning. The moment you stopped walking in the direction you planned and turned toward the thing that was real, even though you could not fully name it yet, even when every practical reason said, keep going. And Nkechi had turned. Everything after was hers. If this story stayed with you, please subscribe right now so you never miss what comes next on this channel. Leave me a comment and tell me the moment that got you. Was it when she kept eating? Was it when Mirai said, I am standing beside it, not behind it? Was it the single word yes? I read every single one. Like this video and share it with every woman in your life who has ever walked into a room that was not made for her and made it hers anyway. That is who this was for. That is who this is always for.